Inez Milholland on horseback during a suffrage parade in 1913. The photograph is part of Hotbed, an exhibition that explores how Greenwich Village played a vital role in the early 20th century suffrage movement. New York Historical Society. Nobody could agree on how many people marched in the Great Fifth Avenue suffrage parade of 1915. The New York City Chief Police Inspector estimated anywhere between 35,000 and 60,000. The New York Times reported the number at precisely 25,340. Anti-suffrage leaders, certain that support for that movement was grossly exaggerated, claimed the true figure was 24,629. Anti-suffragists had reason to be suspicious. Only 23 women had showed up for the city's first suffrage parade 7 years earlier. And those 23 marchers were the kinds of women other suffrage supporters considered militant and shockingly unrefined. Men do not have respect for women who will walk through the public streets in this manner, a suffrage leader said at the time. It is so undignified and so unwomanly. Another suggested that women didn't need to shriek our propaganda at the passerby. A flyer for a 1914 meeting in which Marie Jenny Howe sought to destigmatize the idea of feminism. Nancy Cott via New York Historical Society. Marching was not considered very ladylike. So what happened that so many women found it acceptable to march for suffrage in 1915? Hotbed, which opened November 3 and is the third exhibition at the New York Historical Society's Center for Women's History, asserts that the answer lies in Greenwich Village, which by the early 20th century had become the city's activist center. The political radicals who lived there were mainly middle-class and educated, and for them dignity took on a new meaning as a key element in the fight for equal rights for women. From 1908 to 1915, these figures worked to persuade women that they had to stop behaving so much like ladies. The exhibition's opening gallery sets the scene, with displays of progressive magazines like The Masses and The Woman Voter, photographs showing village hangouts, and other paraphernalia. A map details the proximity of various activist organizations and meeting places. An elaborate diagram includes images of the colorful women who lived and worked in them. A suffragist postcard circa 1910 from the collection of Anne Lewis and Mike Spondle. New York Historical Society. And at the center of this hotbed of activity in the village was Mabel Dodge, who hosted a weekly salon in her apartment on Fifth Avenue. It seems as though everywhere, she once said, barriers went down and people reached out to each other who had never been in touch before. Sarah Gordon and Joanna Scutts, who curated the show for the museum, sought to foreground the camaraderie among this network of liberal village freethinkers. In 1914, Marie Jenny Howe, a writer and feminist activist, wrote, "No one doubts that women are changing. We need an appropriate word which will register this fact." Feminism was that word, and at a meeting in a women's club a year earlier, she had asked, "What is feminism?" Just as women were changing, so was the persona of the suffragist. She was no longer the staid woman who circulated petitions and held hearings to advocate change. She was more willing to be a little loud. Those more rebellious in spirit cast off their corsets. A mannequin in the show features this new, liberating uniform. A free-flowing smock rallied for labor rights, racial equality and peace, spoke about the need for birth control, a topic so taboo that the mere mention of it could lead to arrest. A poster advocating responsible family planning raised the question, mothers, can you afford to have a large family? Some of these posters were translated into Hebrew and Italian in order to reach working-class immigrants. A silent protest against the St. Louis riots of 1917 during a march down Fifth Avenue. James Weldon Johnson collection in the Yale Collection of American Literature by Neck, a rare book and manuscript library. But not all suffragists considered themselves feminists. Suffragists didn't always agree on how the movement should represent womanhood in general, but the clamor over the right to vote seemed to quiet these ideological divisions. The embrace of cross-cultural issues introduced suffrage to a broader group of women and enlivened the campaign in a way that a short time before seemed completely unimaginable. This is represented in the second gallery, which takes us beyond Greenwich Village via memorabilia representing protesters throughout the city. The new suffragist, Hotbed contends, was someone who inserted herself into and then co-opted strategies from a larger movement of protest and change. The village radicals were particularly good at myth-making. The politicking involved a good deal of orchestration and agitation. Ida Rao, a lawyer, artist and prominent village activist, arrived in Union Square at one point in 1916 to illegally distribute birth control pamphlets in a chauffeured limousine, to better ensure she would get noticed and then arrested. Maine suffragists soon borrowed for these headline-making tactics a propaganda post from 1917. New York Historical Society. They also saw an opportunity to carry, choreograph and sell an image of suffrage. A replica of a mobile wagon filled with distributable suffrage ephemera is in the third transitional gallery. There are also buttons, postcards and pins that have slogans with cutesy, gendered language, like "I'm wedded to the cause." Gender-specific items, like cookbooks and pepper shakers, were repurposed as suffrage propaganda. Although women won the right to vote in New York State 100 years ago this month, the final gallery hardly lingers on the triumph because the celebration and united front didn't last very long. Images showing suffragists' support for World War I signal a significant divide. Wartime xenophobia revealed how the suffrage campaign never escaped its race or ethnic privilege. White women thought suffrage would ultimately strengthen the white vote. An article in the previous gallery carrying the headline "Colored Women in Suffrage Parade" and the subhead "Already it is said to have caused dissension in ranks" confirms as much, but by the time of the First World War, the xenophobia had become even more pronounced. Foreign-born radicals in the village who were against the war were considered threats to national unity and were deported. Among them was the well-known anarchist Emma Goldman, who chastised pro-war suffragists for being political chameleons. The exhibition's curators clean up this messy conclusion by displaying images of more recent activism. The one that will most likely resonate with us today, and the final image of the show, is of the 2017 Women's March in Washington, the largest single-day demonstration in United States history. Crowd scientists estimated that 470,000 people were there. More than 3 times the size of the crowd at President Trump's Inauguration Day area. President Trump claimed the media misrepresented this number because to him it looked like 1 million or more attended his inauguration. This dispute made headlines nationwide. Hotbed through March 25 at the New York Historical Society, Manhattan, 2,128,733,400, NYAhistory.org. A version of this article appears in print on November 10, 2017, on page C17 of the New York edition with the headline "From Greenwich Village to the Nation."